watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sanova, and let's see the top stories. Israel claims it has killed Iran's security chief Ali Larijani. Iran releases his handwritten letter. Donald Trump vents frustration with allies over the Strait of Hormuz. And Afghanistan accuses Pakistan of killing hundreds in hospital strike. Israel says a top Iranian security official has been killed, but Iran has not confirmed the claim. Iranian media has released a handwritten letter attributed to Ali Larijani, adding uncertainty to the reports.
Israel's defense minister Israel Katz said on Tuesday that senior Iranian official Ali Larijani had been killed in an Israeli strike, citing information from the military.
I have just been updated by the Chief of Staff that the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, Larijani, and the head of the Basij, Iran's central repression apparatus, Soleimani, who is responsible for the massacre of the protesters, were eliminated last night and have joined the head of the annihilation program, Khamenei, along with all those eliminated from the axis of evil in the depths of hell.
There has been no official confirmation from Iran. State media in Iran released a handwritten condolence letter attributed to Ali Larijani, addressed to fallen naval soldiers, adding uncertainty to reports about his death. If confirmed, Larijani would be among the most senior Iranian figures killed since the reported death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei during Israeli-U.S. airstrikes that began on February 28th. Larijani, born in 1958, previously led Iran's state broadcasting organization for a decade before becoming a close advisor to Khamenei. In 2005, he was appointed Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, a key body responsible for shaping the country's nuclear and security policies. During his tenure, Iran faced growing international pressure over its nuclear program. Following a resolution by the International Atomic Energy Agency in 2005, Tehran warned it could resume uranium enrichment and limit inspections. The United States has long accused Iran of seeking nuclear weapons, while Iran maintains its program is for civilian energy purposes.
U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed frustration with countries declining to send warships to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He said he was unhappy with the response from the UK, who turned down the request. This comes as the conflict in the Middle East enters its third week.
As the conflict in the Middle East enters its 17th day, US President Donald Trump has signaled frustration over the reluctance of allies to support US military efforts, particularly in securing the Strait of Hormuz. Trump earlier called on nations to help safeguard the strait after Iran responded to US-Israeli attacks by using drones, missiles and mines, effectively closing the channel to tankers that normally transport a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer refrained from sending warships to the strait, with authorities saying they were considering only the option of deploying drones to search for mines.
Prime Minister of UK, United Kingdom, yesterday told me, I'm meeting with my team to make a determination. I said, you don't need to meet it with the team. You're the Prime Minister. You can make your own. Why do you have to meet with your team to find out whether or not you're going to send some minesweepers to us or to send some boats?
Meanwhile, strikes across the Middle East have continued, with Iraqi security officials reporting drones and rockets attacking the US embassy in Baghdad in what they describe as the most intense assault since the attacks began. Baghdad's Al Rashid Hotel was also struck on Monday, causing damage but no casualties, though no group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Across Israel, interception explosions were seen in the night sky over Tel Aviv. It comes as the Israeli military says it is advancing operations against Iran, with reports of strikes on Iran's Navy headquarters.
Our pilots attack across Iran all of the time. In the 24 hours, we hit the Revolutionary Guard's Navy headquarters. The Iranian regime used this headquarters to turn the naval arena into a terror arena. In another attack in the heart of Tehran, we hit and destroyed a satellites attack capabilities development center, a center that posed a threat to Israel's and the whole world's space assets and satellites. At the same time, we continue to attack the Basij forces, the Iranian oppression forces.
As the conflict in the Middle East continues, prospects for de-escalation appear limited, with neither the US and Israeli side nor the Iranian side signaling a push towards a ceasefire agreement.
Israel's military says its troops have begun limited and targeted ground operations against the Iran-backed armed group Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Several Western countries have warned that a wider offensive could worsen the humanitarian crisis and prolong the conflict. Here is more.
Canada, France, Germany, Italy and Britain have warned that a major Israeli ground offensive in Lebanon must be averted, saying it could have devastating humanitarian consequences and risk a protracted conflict. The statement also expressed support for Lebanese efforts to disarm Hezbollah and called for urgent engagement between Israeli and Lebanese representatives to negotiate a sustainable political solution. The move came after the Israeli military said on Monday that its troops had begun limited ground operations against Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon in recent days, aimed at strengthening forward defences. Meanwhile, smoke rose over southern Beirut on Tuesday as Israeli strikes hit multiple areas, with flashes of explosions lighting up the night sky. A statement from the Israeli military said the troops had located and dismantled a Hezbollah weapons cache. The area was reportedly evacuated and weapons and materials used for incitement were seized. Tensions have also spilled across the border. Emergency services in northern Israel reported 3 people injured when a projectile fired from Lebanon struck a building, sparking a fire. Lebanon was drawn deeper into the Middle East conflict on March 2nd after the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah fired rockets at Israel, claiming retaliation for the killing of Iran's supreme leader at the start of the US-Israel war with Iran. Lebanese authorities report more than 880 people have been killed, over 1 million displaced, and more than 130,000 now living in collective shelters. Israel has maintained positions in southern Lebanon since a ceasefire with Hezbollah in November 2024. But the latest escalation has raised fears the conflict could spiral into a wider regional war.
Missile fire and debris are increasingly hitting Jerusalem as regional tensions spill into densely populated areas, while northern Israel faces fresh rocket and drone attacks from Hezbollah. Among the Lebanese border, Israeli ground operations are expanding, raising fears of a prolonged conflict as casualties mount on both sides. Our correspondent Maria Rodriguez of Balde, who is on the ground, has more.
Here in Jerusalem, missile attacks are becoming more and more frequent, and we can clearly see how the missiles cross the city on their way to Tel Aviv. A massive piece of an Iranian missile fell right here in this Greek compound beside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and also missiles rained debris over the Temple Mount and the Jewish quarter. 6 wounded after Hezbollah rocket impact sparks fire in northern Israel. Rocket and drone fire rained down also in Nahariya with several injured people. Battles now erupting along the Lebanese border. Several divisions entered in the south of the country, amounting to thousands of troops were now operating, with 2 more to join them in the next few days. Israeli fighter jets have continued to strike towns and villages, while state media say 9 people, including 3 paramedics, were killed, and also 2 Israeli soldiers The ground operations are a new blow to Lebanese sovereignty and will stoke fears of a prolonged Israeli occupation. Hezbollah's Secretary General Naim Qassem has reportedly ordered right-wing forces to move out and begin operating against IDF troops. Right-wing units are Hezbollah's elite assault force training for cross-border attacks and high-intensity combat. The Lebanese government says the number of displaced people in Lebanon has exceeded 1 million at the moment. Israel continues attacking Lebanon and Iran simultaneously, and Israeli military official expects the war in its neighboring country it will last at least until the end of May, according to local media.
At least 11 people were killed and 55 injured nationwide as Russia launched 178 drones overnight, most of them intercepted, though Ukraine's Air Force said some struck 12 locations. Strikes on energy infrastructure caused temporary power outages in several regions, including Dnipropetrovsk, Odessa, Kharkiv and Chernihiv. Deadly attacks were reported in Donetsk, Sumy, Zaporizhia and Kherson, with civilians among the casualties. Officials say Russia continues to target both frontline areas and critical infrastructure across the country. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in the United Kingdom. The visit will include an audience with King Charles III, talks with Prime Minister Keir Starmer and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, as well as an address to the British Parliament. Zelensky said the focus is on strengthening Ukraine's security and expanding opportunities, thanking the UK for its continued support. U.S. President Donald Trump may delay his visit to China by about a month. Our correspondent Mahnur Maktoum has more from Beijing.
U.S. President Donald Trump said that Washington has asked China to postpone his planned summit in Beijing with President Xi Jinping by about a month, citing the ongoing war with Iran and his need to stay in Washington to oversee military operations. The visit, initially set for late March to early April, is now uncertain. U.S. officials have offered differing explanations for the possible delay. On Sunday, Trump told the Financial Times he might push back the meeting if China did not help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. However, on Monday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that any delay would be due to the need to coordinate war efforts, not because of requests for China to police the strait or because of trade tensions. Despite the uncertainty, analysts said that both sides remained focused on maintaining stable relations and preparing for a successful visit. They noted that for China's export-driven economy, managing growing global economic uncertainty is the top priority. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian struck a similar tone on Monday when responding to Trump's remarks, emphasizing that head of state diplomacy is vital for guiding U.S.-China relations and confirming that both sides are still in communication about the visit. Mahnur Maktoum, A News, Beijing.
Preliminary agreements were reached during the latest China-U.S. trade talks in Paris. Both sides also voiced concerns over unilateral trade measures and pledged to continue discussions to stabilize economic ties.
China and the United States concluded their sixth round of economic and trade talks in Paris on Monday, focusing on tariffs, investment and broader bilateral trade cooperation ahead of President Donald Trump's planned visit to Beijing at the end of March. Chinese Vice Commerce Minister Li Chenggang described the discussions as in-depth, candid and constructive.
Through this consultation, the two sides have already achieved some preliminary consensus on several topics and will continue to engage in consultations going forward.
Li also criticized recent U.S. Section 301 trade investigations, saying China expressed serious concern and warned they could undermine the hard-won stability in China-U.S. economic and trade relations. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called the meetings very good and constructive, highlighting that the talks demonstrated stability in the bilateral relationship. He added that any postponement of Trump's visit would be due to the ongoing Iran war, not China's commitments.
Residents in Tennessee have been affected by intense storms that have caused significant property damage and power outages. This comes as authorities report severe weather affecting eastern states since Sunday.
This is the aftermath in Tennessee after major storms swept across the United States. Residents in Columbia have been left with severe damage to their homes and vehicles after a tornado followed storms on Sunday. They have expressed fear, with some saying it is the first time they have experienced anything like it.
After going through that last night, I'm very scared of the storms because usually they just go right over us and it's not a big deal. Like my whole life never had to worry, they give warnings and watches, but it's never been close to home. It's always went over us down the road, and this one hit us, and it was very scary during the middle of it.
It started raining, and I have a cat. He was getting freaked out. I tried to turn the TV on to drown out the sound. I was going to sit down and eat a burger for the night, and it all happened so fast. It hit. I grabbed him. We ran and stayed in the bathroom, and then it kind of calmed down, and all I could hear was just water pouring, and it was just all pouring in my house. And I was trying to set out buckets and towels and stuff, and it was more than I could do.
Following the storms, there have been reports of power outages affecting thousands. However, technical crews are on site in an effort to manage the situation. The National Weather Service had earlier warned of the approaching storms and advised residents to seek shelter in their homes until they passed. It comes as authorities say severe weather is ongoing across eastern states, including Arkansas, Illinois and Alabama, with more than 450 reports of severe weather and 9 confirmed tornadoes since Sunday. So far, no casualties have been reported.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the escalating war on Iran and rising tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. Stay tuned.
Some of the problems of European Union today are connected with the rapid enlargement. How do you see this issue today in 2026?
After Brexit, no country will never get out of the European Union.
Europe is facing massive challenges. How do you see Europe in 50 years' time?
Not easy. In the future, we shall have in our reserves as many dollars as many euros, because if side by side with the dollar there is the euro, there will be room for the renminbi.
Welcome back to A News. Our top story for discussion: tensions in the war on Iran are escalating sharply. Drone and rocket attacks have targeted the U.S. embassy in Baghdad, while Israeli airstrikes hit key military sites across Iran. The Strait of Hormuz remains at the center of global concern, with energy security, shipping risks and diplomatic divisions deepening between the United States and its European allies. As Donald Trump pushes for a naval coalition, European leaders, including Friedrich Merz, are resisting military involvement, urging diplomacy instead. To unpack the geopolitical, military and strategic implications of this rapidly evolving conflict, we're joined by Daniela Mello, political scientist who speaks to us from Boston, United States. Daniela, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let me start with the latest news on Iran war. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz said on Tuesday that Iran's security chief Ali Larijani had been killed in an Israeli strike. Could you comment, Ed, how it will impact on the recent situation in the Middle East?
Well, it is still unclear what sort of impact it will have on the battleground. In part, I mean, we know that Larijani is a top leader, and this will definitely have, at the very least, a psychological impact in the operations. But there's very little that we know about what the internal structure of the Revolutionary Guards is at the moment. And let me explain it this way. the Revolutionary Guards have structured themselves in a way that the absence of any one leader is not going to block their actions. In fact, what a lot of my colleagues in political science who study military strategy have been talking about is that the Revolutionary Guards have a decentralized power structure in which every hub of the Revolutionary Guards is able to have some level of autonomy and decision making in terms of striking and retaliating against the United States, Israel, or choosing targets across the region. What this means is that the decapitation of any one leader is certainly still important. I mean, I don't want to minimize this particular death. It is a blow to the regime, but it may not be as strong a blow to the capacity of the Revolutionary Guards to continue to enact their campaign against these attacks, because they prepared themselves for this eventuality.
Daniela, a second attack hit the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Is Washington underestimating the risk of escalation as attacks on U.S. assets intensify across the region?
Well, formally, Washington says that no, that it prepared for this. But there are signals that, in fact, there was some level of miscalculation. And we see that in the absence of preparation of Washington for the absence of contingency plans for exactly what's happening right now with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So while it's realistic to believe Pete Hegseth when he comes to the journalists and he talks about, having fully prepared for all of these contingencies. On the ground, we are seeing that that's in practice not true. Otherwise, Donald Trump and his administration would probably have reached out to its allies within NATO and reached out to other global players way ahead of the intervention, preparing for this eventuality. So it seems that it's escalating a lot farther and a lot faster than the Americans expected. Certainly, it appears that, and I think this is a reasonable reading of the situation, it appears that the Americans did not expect the Iranian regime to be as resilient as it has been, or to be as aggressive in its escalation tactics as it has been. And now it finds itself trying to scramble to find allies to help secure the passage in the Strait of Hormuz, for instance.
So when Friedrich Merz says this war is not a NATO matter, does that expose serious fractures within the Western alliance?
I would say it does, but that fracture has been visible for a long time. There has always been disagreements, even within the NATO alliance, about various interventions of the United States across the decades. The war in Iraq is a good example. In 2003, many of the European countries disagreed with the justification for the war, and NATO was divided over whether or not it should help the United States, and countries ended up doing it in a bilateral manner. So the UK joined the effort, for instance, but other European countries did not. So these tensions are not necessarily new, but there is something different about them right now, because we are talking about tensions that emerge in a period in which the United States is led by a president who does not believe in following international law, does not trust in alliances, did not bring its European allies. I'm talking about the European allies because they're the most obvious ones. Obviously, Canada is also part of this. But basically, NATO was not consulted. And NATO is correct in saying when Merz says NATO is a defensive alliance, not an offensive alliance, he is sticking to the rules. He's sticking to the law. He's sticking to the language of the treaty. But he's also asserting that in many ways, there was no consultation. There was no the Europeans, this is not their war. They were not consulted about it. They are having to deal with it like the rest of the world. But the NATO alliance is itself more at risk than it has ever been, I would say, in its history, in part because the United States, the strongest power within the NATO alliance itself, is going at its conflicts unilaterally without assessments and without even invitations, right, to allies to help achieve strategic goals. So NATO is at risk. NATO is at risk because the international order that made sense, in which NATO made sense, is quickly dissipating.
So if the International Maritime Organization says escorts cannot guarantee safety in the Strait of Hormuz effectively, is it becoming uncontrollable, the Strait of Hormuz?
There doesn't seem to be a very easy way out of the situation. The Iranians don't have to use a great deal of resources to be able to maintain control of Hormuz, because what they're doing is using very cheap drones to launch attacks against ships that try to go through, thus generating great fear. And that fear alone is truly what's paralyzing the ships within the Persian Gulf, excuse me. But having said that, I mean, they can still escalate further. This is not the only tool that the Iranians have at their disposal. They understand that the international energy market is clearly going to be hit really hard. So the pain is spread around. It's not just going to affect the United States. It's going to create incentives for all countries around the world, but certainly the Europeans in particular, to put even more pressure on the Israelis and the Americans to find a way out of this. They can still strike. They can still attack oil infrastructure, especially along the southern part of the Gulf. And if they do so, we're not talking about short-term solutions. Like, you can open the Straits of Hormuz, but if key infrastructure is actually destroyed, the global market is still going to be disrupted, at least in the medium term. So there's still room for escalation, and that's clearly what the Iranians are betting on, that they can actually wait off and survive by pressuring the United States further and further to exit this war, and eventually the Israelis, and by causing as much pain as they can to the international oil market. And they still have the resources to continue this pressure campaign.
Daniela, with Western leaders warning against a major Israeli ground offensive in Lebanon, how close are we to another devastating regional front opening?
I'd say we're already there. The Israelis seem to be fairly committed to being able to pursue Hezbollah within the borders of Lebanon and taking this opportunity to do so. It's primarily an Israeli war at this point. The Americans are far more focused on continuing to bomb the Iranians, but we are looking at a destabilized region. We are already seeing massive movements of civilians across the region trying to escape this conflict. And Mr. Netanyahu seems to see an opportunity here that he doesn't want to let go of, to be able to decapitate the regime in Iran and do away with Hezbollah next door as well. So I don't see any indications that that is about to cease.
And ultimately, does this conflict risk redefining NATO's role or exposing its limits in modern asymmetric warfare?
I would say this is not a NATO war. I mean, that's what NATO is also, what other NATO members are saying, in spite of what the American president claims. I mean, the American president is basically signaling very strongly that if NATO doesn't come to the help of the United States in, maintaining the Strait of Hormuz open, that there's no reason to be for NATO. I mean, it's yet another argument from the American president attacked backing a collective security agreement that has benefited all of its members for over 7 decades, give or take. This is a difficult place for NATO to be in, because once trust erodes in the ability of, once trust erodes in the willingness of the United States or of any other member to actually come to the help of another member if they're being attacked, right? What's the reason for NATO to exist then? NATO is built on that pillar of trust. And if that pillar of trust doesn't exist, if the Europeans feel that the Americans are not going to come to their rescue if the Russians invade, then it ceases to serve its purpose. And it's an existential moment for NATO, is what I'm saying.
Daniela Melo, thank you very much for talking to A News and sharing your insights with us today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Now, after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region.
Before partition, Pakistanis were singled out, attacked, and forced from their homes.
More than 200,000 Muslims were eliminated through massacres, through displacement.
In all Indian states, the communities are being oppressed, and the Indian Army is committing atrocities against them.
I left Indian-occupied Kashmir and came to Azad Kashmir on foot.
We cannot even go to the graves of our loved ones. We cannot even pray for them.
What is the fault of the Kashmiri people?
Kashmir is the place where partition never ended.
The region of Kashmir is between 3 nuclear powers.
If a nuclear war breaks out here, not only the South Asia, but the entire world will be affected.
If India believes that people of Jammu and Kashmir are with them, let them go for their referendum tomorrow.
For a Kashmiri, what matters the most is Azadi, is the right of self-determination. Azadi from Indian hegemony.
Welcome back, and now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. A devastating airstrike in Kabul has left hundreds feared dead, marking a major escalation in regional tensions. Afghan officials are blaming neighboring Pakistan for targeting a hospital, a claim Islamabad denies. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
A spokesman for the Afghan government says at least 400 people were killed and around 250 injured when an airstrike hit a drug rehabilitation hospital in the capital late Monday evening. Witnesses report hearing multiple explosions as patients and staff were finishing evening prayers, with bombs striking patient wards and other parts of the facility. Local media footage shows flames engulfing sections of a hospital complex, thick smoke rising into the night sky, and emergency teams carrying bodies away on stretchers. Authorities say the target site was a large state-run treatment center with up to 2,000 beds. and rescue operations are still ongoing as crews search for victims and try to contain the damage. Pakistan has rejected the allegation, calling them false and misleading, and insists its forces carried out precise strikes against what it describes as a militant infrastructure. The incident comes amid intensifying conflict between the two neighbors, which began last month and has already seen cross-border attacks and rising casualties on both sides. China has urged restraint, calling for a return to negotiations, while the United Nations has expressed concern over reports of civilian deaths. However, casualty figures remain unverified, and independent confirmation has not yet been possible as tensions continue to rise. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
The European Union is raising specific and increasingly sharp concerns about Georgia's political direction, focusing on controversial laws, the handling of protests and broader democratic standards. At the same time, the issue is exposing divisions inside the EU itself, with most member states criticizing Tbilisi, while Hungary openly supports the Georgian government. Nini Nikolashvili has more from Tbilisi.
The European Union is stepping up pressure on Georgia, warning of democratic backsliding linked to specific recent developments. Speaking ahead of a meeting of EU foreign ministers in Brussels, Kaja Kallas said the situation in Georgia is becoming more and more serious, confirming that a visa ban on Georgian diplomatic passport holders has been in force since March 6. EU concerns are tied to two key issues: the adoption of the so-called foreign agents law, which European officials argue restricts civil society and independent organizations, and the authorities' handling of ongoing anti-government protests, including allegations of pressure on demonstrators and limitations on political freedoms. These concerns were echoed by multiple EU member states. Finnish Foreign Minister Elina Valtonen warned that new legislation is limiting freedoms and weakening democratic safeguards. Lithuanian Foreign Minister Kęstutis Budrys said the use of the foreign agents law raises serious questions about the state of democracy. Meanwhile, other EU officials stressed that Georgia's path toward European integration depends directly on maintaining democratic standards and institutions. In contrast, Hungary openly rejected the EU's critical stance. Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó defended the Georgian government, arguing that democratic elections had taken place and that protests are a normal democratic process. He accused the EU of applying double standards and confirmed Hungary's political support for Tbilisi. The Georgian government also pushed back. A member of the ruling Georgian Dream, Tengiz Sharmanashvili, dismissed Kallas as biased and described EU criticism as unfounded. He also rejected the findings of the OSCE Moscow Mechanism report, claiming it lacked evidence and was politically predetermined. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Kazakhstan has adopted a new constitution following a national referendum on March 15th, in which 87% of participating voters supported the proposal, according to the Central Referendum Commission. 9 million of the 12 million eligible voters cast ballots, resulting in a turnout of 73%. Among those who voted, almost 80 million supported the proposal, while nearly 900,000 voted against it. The remaining ballots were declared invalid. According to protocols submitted by territorial referendum commissions, the new constitution has been adopted. Kazakhstan is taking a step toward entering the European green energy market. Lawmakers in Astana have ratified a strategic agreement with Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan that could pave the way for a new trans-regional energy corridor linking Central Asia to Europe. The project focuses on exporting renewable electricity through routes across the Caspian and Black Seas as demand for clean energy continues to grow.
Kazakhstan's Majlis has ratified the strategic partnership agreement with Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan on green energy. The project could reshape the region's energy landscape and open a direct route to European markets. The deal was signed by the three countries' leaders in Baku in 2024 on the sidelines of COP29. It aims to link the energy systems of Central Asia and the South Caucasus into a single export network. The plan is to deliver renewable electricity from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to Azerbaijan and then onto Europe. A key part of the project is a high-voltage subsea cable along the bottom of the Caspian Sea. It's technically complex, but officials say it's essential for direct access to the European Union's electricity market. The feasibility study is already backed by international partners. The Asian Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank have confirmed grant funding of around $2 million. The study itself is estimated at about 1 million euros. In Astana, officials say the project will strengthen export capacity and support technological development. Kazakhstan is also looking to position itself as a key energy hub in Eurasia as demand for clean energy grows in Europe looks to diversify its supplies. Parisa Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss Kazakhstan's green energy corridor linking Central Asia to Europe. See you shortly.
One with Mars, the global AI and sensor technology starts now.
We need to adapt much quicker and much faster to allow us to detect, to classify and to ultimately defeat these new asymmetric threats. We can use NIDAR to autonomously instruct and guide that asset, whether it be a tracked UGV or a surveillance drone.
Welcome back to A News. Kazakhstan is stepping into Europe's green energy market, ratifying a landmark deal with Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan to export renewable electricity, hydrogen and ammonia via a new Caspian corridor. The project, driven by the Green Corridor Alliance, includes a groundbreaking deep water cable under the Caspian Sea, potentially linking Central Asia's vast renewables to the European Union as demand for clean energy surges. To discuss the geopolitical, economic and technical implications of this ambitious green energy corridor, we are joined by Kostis Georgopoulos, Director of Energy, Climate Policy and Security at NE Global Media, joining us from Athens, Greece. Mr. Georgopoulos, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So, Mr. Georgopoulos, how significant is this agreement for Kazakhstan's long-term green energy strategy, and what makes the Green Corridor Alliance a unique initiative in the region?
As you mentioned in the report earlier, it's an agreement that was initially signed during COP29 in Baku. And it's a very significant agreement because Kazakhstan needs access to the European electricity market. And even though there's been discussed about having exports from the Caspian region exported to Europe, this would allow for Kazakhstan also to be, and Uzbekistan, to be able to reach the European market. this project would allow for a very technically challenging but a very important project for an electricity cable along the Caspian seabed. And it would allow for Kazakhstan renewable energy, including hydrogen and ammonia, and from Kazakhstan as well as Uzbekistan, and potentially join renewable energy from the Azerbaijan and the Off-Sea Caspian region to be exported to Europe. Azerbaijan, I was actually recently in Romania, and we were discussing in the Black Sea Energy Week the potential for the cable along the Black Sea. So that has been discussed for a while. Also, during in Baku, during the South Gas Corridor and Ministerial Council, and also the Green Energy Council, which has started since 2023, they've been discussing the potential for export of renewable energy from Azerbaijan to Europe via the Black Sea. But this agreement allows for Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan also to join in this very ambitious project. And Kazakhstan has been spearheading, even though it's a major hydrocarbon exporter and contributes to the regional and European energy security. It has been looking also to produce renewable energy as well for export, but also as well for improving the conditions and reducing CO2 emissions within the country. Which is very important to mention is that in Astana in next month, I believe in April 22, 24, actually I'm going to be there. They have the Regional Ecological Summit. So there's going to be a lot of issues discussed about climate change, but also there's a major expo which will feature renewables and all the latest green technologies. And that would be, there will be delegations obviously from Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, from the European Union. And it's a very, very important event. So all this project kind of falls in line with all these regional ambitions to tackle climate change, deals with problems like with the shrinkage of the Caspian Sea, and the need to tackle environmental concerns within the region.
Mr. Geropoulos, but how feasible is the plan to lay a deep water cable under the Caspian Sea? What challenges, for instance, environmental challenges, could arise during implementation?
The Caspian Sea, you don't have, of course, the extreme weather situations that you have in either other deep seas. But I think, you have to, the technology has improved a lot over the years. So, there would have to be feasibility studies, environmental studies. And if it's feasible, they would proceed. I mean, it has to be also economically feasible. I mean, there has been interest from private investors, but also from the countries in the European Union. But it has to be also economically and environmentally feasible.
So in your view, could this corridor reduce Europe's dependence on traditional energy suppliers?
In the long run, yes. I mean, as you see now, obviously, with the situation in the Middle East and everything, I mean, Europe is very vulnerable to sudden changes. But in the long run, I mean, that's the plan, is to have enough renewables to not to be dependent only on fossil fuels, but it's also good for the environment. So the European Union has been looking for a long time for this transit to transit into green energy and reducing CO2 emissions, but it has to be done gradually as well, because I mean, obviously Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan are very important hydrocarbon producers. So it has to be, a gradual move from traditional supplies to more green energy supplies.
Mr. Geropoulos, how aligned are Uzbekistan's energy capabilities with this export vision?
Well, part of the project, I mean, I was looking at the agreement, is to be able to interconnect the systems between the three countries, but also to modernize and integrate the energy infrastructure. So, as we mentioned, this is a very long-term project, but they have to work on the infrastructure to change and make all the necessary changes from Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan to be able to join this project.
So what kind of investment and financing structure might be required?
Well, it has to be a mixture between private investors and as well as, with the European Union, maybe the BRD would be involved. I mean, knowing the BRD is very much involved in these projects, especially as I mentioned, in Romania, and they're discussing about the Black Sea project as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll have to be a mixture between private and banks and banking institutions, but also the countries might be involved, because I mean, Kazakhstan's interest is to have an electricity route to the European Union. So this would allow for the project to move forward. So we might see some state investment as well.
Mr. Georgopoulos, what timeline are we realistically looking at before exports begin?
Well, I mean, I think that it has to depends on the feasibility studies, and it's the first phase of the project. So once the feasibility studies are completed, and once the first financing phase is in place, then we'll have more clearly indication. I mean, maybe 2029. I don't know.
Kostas Georgopoulos, thank you very much for talking to A News. We truly appreciate you joining us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates, and thank you for watching.